Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online. Hello if you're watching us online. So whether you're in Bristol or you're far away, you can join in the conversation. My name is Martin O'Leary. I'm the head of studio here. I'm a white man in my 40s, long hair and a beard, wearing a fairly cozy brown jumper today. It's quite chilly out. Every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday, where we offer you the chance to spend some time in our space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Especially a big welcome to anyone who's new to the studio. Can anyone who's new to the studio put your hand up? Hello. Welcome. This bit is for you. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, UE Bristol and the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council England as well as by generous donations from members of the public, just like yourselves. We offer studio space, including desks, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And most of all, we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make some time for collaboration. So just a few notes before we begin. Please do feel free to move around. You can grab a cup of tea or coffee from the kitchen back there. The coffee machine has been fixed since last week. We have a quiet space just next to this space, so if you want to take a break at any point, you can pop in there. That's to my left, your right, just around the corner. There's some sofas and beanbags, and the door closes, and it's reasonably well soundproofed. So if you want to take a break, chill out at any point, just pop in there. We're not expecting a fire drill. If you hear a fire alarm, it is probably real. Fire exits are at the other end of the studio, so again, my left, your right, at either side, but in any event, the studio team will direct you to them if you should need them. And finally, there are accessible toilets, including baby change, in the corridor over there, just next to the kitchen. There'll be a Q&A at the end of this talk, so those of you who are watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Lawatim is here. He will be your voice in the room today. If you're in the building, please raise your hand, and we'll send a microphone around so that the folks at home can hear what you're saying. You can get news on all of our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio or the news section on our website, watershed.co.uk/takepart, which gathers together all the exciting things that are going on in the building that aren't cinema showings. Or you can check us out on social media, at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, at pmstudiouk.bsky.social on Blue Sky, at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or if you really must, look up Pervasive Media Studio on LinkedIn. Today's talk is part of Home, which is a year of making, experiencing, and sharing ideas of home. For the past year, Watershed has been hosting a program of films, immersive art, talks, and workshops that explore the many different ways in which people find, make, imagine, long for, and escape home. You can find more about the whole programme at watershed.co.uk/home, and in particular our house party on Saturday the 28th of March, which will draw that programme to a close. It'll be right here. There's going to be all sorts of fun things going on. Please do come along. All right, enough of that. Our speaker for today is Joseph Wilk. Joseph is an artist, programmer, and a studio resident who uses the digital to explore disability and disability to explore the digital. His piece, WrongMove, is a video work that explores the conditions of the Greater London rental market over a year, creating a 3D visual landscape from a rental market optimised for profit and a desperation to find a home. Today, he's going to share with us the process of turning experiences of frustration into work designed to shame rental websites into action. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Joseph.
Timeout. Hi. Check this works. Cool. So, as Martin said, this is going to be a kind of an overview of this entire process of creating this project, WrongMove, kind of sharing some of the meaning behind it and some of the problems and some of the process that ends up with the final piece. But before we move to WrongMove, we need to move RightMove. In case you're not aware, RightMove is the UK's largest property, rental and commercial website. It is a PLC, UK-based, that makes about 390 million in revenue. Its business model is from advertising. It has two big ideas that underpin its strategy. One, which is Go Greener, which is a lot about providing search tools to find more green property in the rental market. and artificial intelligence, which directly contradicts the green one, but that's capitalism. As a company, internally, it is definitely very aware of diversity, equality, and inclusion. They give up one day on International Persons with Disabilities Day to invite a speaker along. So there is at least one mention within their company report about disability. It's okay, I guess. And also, for the last 2 years, has been voted as Tech Business of the Year by a random award ceremony, probably run by themselves. But hey, I have no evidence for that, by the way. I should also say I have no affiliation with WrongMove, in case that was not clear. Okay, yeah, so let's start this journey of WrongMove. So this is where Rage Against the Machine plays, if I had the license for it. WrongMove is really my response to the fact that as a wheelchair user with any access requirements, trying to find somewhere to live in the UK is a crap experience. And I'm going to take you through some of the journey of me discovering this and what I did about it. So we start with me living just in the outskirts of Greater London, offered a job around Old Street, and having to move for the first time, living on my own with a wheelchair. The sort of magnitude of that step to quantify is the sort of kind of thing you do where you can't think about the actual reality of what you're doing and just throw yourself to it. Previously that I was living supported. This was moving on my own. So a massive deal, a big time pressure, a job to get. And of course, I went to the website WrongMove, where I thought, okay, I need to find somewhere to live. Surely, with the invent of all this amazing technology and a company that wins awards for technology, they will provide me with some assistance in trying to find a flat to rent. And already I started to discover that, okay, there's not necessarily, sorry, I'll move a bit, my neck's craning. There's not necessarily the criteria that I need when looking for a property, right? So must-haves, the garden, parking, I mean, house share, possibly useful, retirement homes, student accommodation, not really what I'm looking for. So, okay, they don't provide a criteria for me to look for accessible, whatever that means. So we turn to the estate agents, and, you know, lots of phone calls with lots of estate agents, asking, you know, like very clear, like I need step-free access. I know you won't understand what the estate agent won't understand what wheelchair access means, but step-free, right? So the estate agent takes us to properties with 6 stairs leading up and says, oh, is this a problem? And just compress that and take that in and be like, yeah, it is a bit of a problem. So we move on. Eventually we get a property where we can see, which consists of a step in the property. In case you're not aware, under most rental agreements within the UK, you are not allowed to modify your home in any way whatsoever to meet your access needs. So this is the real situation of contemplating living in an apartment where like 10% of the apartment is non-accessible for a ridiculous amount of rent. And again, the competition for property is so fierce that first viewings go. So like you get to see this property, you're thinking about, can I live with this situation, and bang, it's gone. You need to find somewhere else. So the estate agents aren't helping, the WrongMove platform is not helping, so we turn to Google Maps and Street View and just staring at slightly blurry sort of pictures of doors and trying to work out if there's stairs, if something is accessible. It kind of works, unfortunately, not well enough, but this is where we turn to. And what you start to notice when looking for like accessible property in Greater London, there's this, I refer to it as this gross aesthetic of like luxury. Like you're looking for access that's a lifestyle choice and is full of like really expensive like gyms, swimming pools, cinemas, penthouses, amazing views across London. That's what access means from an aesthetic for the Greater London area. Did I go to sleep? No. Ooh. Let me go put it with my finger. It's stuck. Hey, there we go. So what we find is that when the Conservative Party decided to not enforce access and make it optional, you put up profit versus access, right? And unsurprisingly, in like $1 trillion market, which I think is the 4th largest commercial property market in the world, the UK effectively chooses profit, right? And access just gets squished out. It's really gone. Let me try turning it on and off. I'll give up with that and come over here. So money wins, right? We simply, access just gets pushed out. Even when there's goodwill, effectively this market is so full of cash and it's optimized for it. And that's all that matters. And the reality is WrongMove as a company and the estate agents are all benefiting from this system. So they have no incentive to deal with access. That's why you need regulation. Which takes us to the point that I encounter a lot working as an artist dealing with disability is speaking to any disabled person who's tried to find a rental property. We all know this. This is nothing new. In terms of making a piece of work, I don't need to make this for disabled people because they already get it. They understand why the system's broken. They understand the problems. So the question I had is, well, okay, how can I make something that, firstly, makes the problem visible, right? Like these companies and these systems have chosen not to prioritize access. Ideally, I'd like to change that. But at worst, can I just shame them enough to show that like this is the reality of trying to find access? And then potentially create something that if they were to target access and improve it, then my project would show that, which would be a fictitious cycle of them showing that they're taking action and improving access. That's the goal. But unfortunately, when you create work that you explicitly label as disability work, it just turns off a bunch of audiences. And that's not my goal. I want to get as much visibility as possible. And a lot of my work over the last couple of years has taken real inspiration from Matthew Bolsek's Opening the Horse. Is a series of 3 different kind of like zines where they explore games and how to explore queer identity within games. And they present this really powerful thought, which I'm trying to embed in most of my work and in this project, is that if I just make a piece about disability and say disability sucks, then people might see that, but it's a very limited audience. So if we lean into the fact that we're using digital technology, hiding underneath that we are using kind of like data visualization, we're providing wider context of not just disability, but what is this system like, and provide many perspectives on the Greater London market, we can embed what we're trying to say within this as what he calls a Trojan horse, an ideological Trojan horse within our work, which means more people see it and hopefully more people are exposed to the fact that disability in the rental market is a really, really hard problem. This isn't to discount other ways of approaching. I'm not suggesting this is the way. I'm just suggesting this is an interesting way if you're trying to get a mass audience and conform more with what the audience expectations are. So this takes me on a little diversion into scraperism, which is treating the internet as a found material. This is what a lot of my work has been doing, where effectively we pull down images from very large archives and kind of like collage, recombinance, determinant, bring them together in ways to talk about things. So this was examining the Wellcome Trust digital archive, which is full of lithographs of very prestigious doctors, and using data scraperism, pulling down that database, using digital tools to kind of examine it, take meaning from it, and then usually a lot of manual process in animating and bringing it together to say something which is about the medical gaze and the prestige of the doctors, is an example of scraperism. This is another example using the Houses of Parliament, the House of Lords, sorry. This is all the mouths of every single House of Lords member. Again, like all this information is on the website, it's sufficiently big and it's hard work that the digital comes in as a process for like getting that data set, manipulating it, and bringing it together. It doesn't have to just be about kind of collage. It can also be then about using digital ways of converting that into something else. So this was what an average lord or an average baroness looks like by taking all those profiles that we found in the data set and finding a new way to visualize it, which creates the generic shape of what a lord or a baroness looks like. It's also not necessarily just stuck with images, right? The video is a normal content on the internet. This is a collage of people waiting for large language models, AI systems, to give them answers. And it's literally just a supercut of silence of people just waiting. Yeah, so we need to get some data. We have some ideas. We have this practice of scraperism, but we need to go and dig into this data set. Thankfully, WrongMove as a website wants you to find stuff in it, which makes it quite easy to try and deconstruct it. Very simply, it does provide like a map of Greater London. I'm purposely choosing Greater London because I want, again, from an audience perspective, I want to get the biggest possible data set, and I feel like that's a good target area. But websites don't actually want you to search Greater London, right? This isn't going to get you all the properties. It's an illusion of that. It'll give you a very small number of properties, which means you need to do a bunch of work to discover how properties are mapped and represented within WrongMove. You can already see here by searching for London, you get stuff like South London, North London. Even these are just, for the like density of certain parts of London, are still not granular enough. So you have to really just map out the whole of London really, really painfully with little like sectors, and then work out how the website represents these. So you can kind of feed them in and do a bunch of searches automatically from the command line, which are going to bring in lots of property websites, which we can then get the data from. The website itself is pretty easy and flexible to get stuff from. I'm not going to go too deep into the technical details, but effectively it's HTML, and it has very specific criteria for what it's trying to be, right? Like it needs to tell you where the property is, which means it contains a longitude and latitude, always has a description, which is the most interesting bit for this project, about describing the property, usually written by the estate agents, a price, and some pictures attached to it. So we then run these scripts. We do this in a way that's what I refer to as, I don't know how to put that, like respectful of the fact we don't want to take WrongMove down, right? Like we're not just running a system that's going to like hammer this thing. We make it responsibly. Unlike a lot of the AI companies, we make it have long delays. We make it so it might fetch at a very off-peak time. So for example, I think this will like fetch a new property list. It knows if it's already seen properties. If it finds a new property, it will fetch the data for that. Wait a minute, then fetch another one. So it follows normal usage patterns. Very important, because obviously if I did this without any of that, the computer would just hammer the website, and they have no intention to take WrongMove down or provide any denial of service attack. So then this is the really slow but immensely satisfying part of just leaving this stuff running for a year, just coming back to it and just seeing this hard drive fill up with just pages and pages of properties. I think it ended up with 1 terabyte of data and about a million different properties. The UK rental market is estimated about 4.2 million rental properties. That's a pretty big chunk, and only focusing on Greater London. And so I took all this HTML data, we got prices, and just quickly try and look at it, because this is big enough a data set that I can't just browse it easily. So all I did was take these little properties and map the price to the size of the block. That's it, and that's all like a million of the properties. I love the fact that basically like this is a sane rent. About here, everything from here up is just ridiculous. It's wild. And I scaled these all based on the biggest, which seemed like a logical thing to do at the time, but clearly something interesting is going on, and we find our first discovery from making this data like browsable, visible. And so immediately I was like, okay, I'll put the prices into these and just have a look what's going on. We've already exceeded way beyond my budget here. We're looking at like $2,000 per calendar month on rental. I think this is getting to about halfway where we start to see 12K per calendar month. None of these are commercial properties. And I was just wanting to know what is going on. Why am I getting these massive like boxes? Which is a property for 241K a calendar month, which I thought must just be a mistake, but no. There's another one for 216K a calendar month. This is like money laundering money. 210K, it's not an anomaly. There are properties, and there's quite a few of those properties that sit at that price. So again, we've found something interesting that I did not expect. I did not know this was here. But again, in terms of telling our narrative and constructing this piece about access, we have a wider context to provide. Price is kind of weird. So we have this big chunk of like terabyte of data that's just very rich content all about the property market of the UK. And as a background programmer and within the current moment, I looked at lots of different tools. I experimented a lot with using AI tools for trying to detect if there were stairs in images. It's kind of crap and doesn't work well enough. The same applies for large language models. We have a lot of data here, but the little people being eaten by the slot machine wave. The problem is that accuracy just sucks, right? These systems just make stuff up and are not a good way if we want real precision to dig into this data set. So not an appropriate tool, ignoring all the other myriad of ethical reasons why those systems are challenging. So all we did was do natural language processing, very simple, trying to find all the adjectives that occur across that terabyte data set and put it in some way that we can start to look at it. And again, this is a composed piece, so trying to find counterpoints that might be interesting to put next to access and see how those feel. In terms of what I mean when I say access, I'm being very generous within this data set. So I'm not just looking for the word access. I'm combining a few things like accessibility, basically my own lived experience telling me like anything about step 3, anything about wheelchair. And then we have the other words, which we start to see interesting things like iconic, immaculate, panoramic, award-winning. Oh man, I hate these words so much. Cinema, like chef's quarters is a thing. Again, chandeliers, marble floors. So the approach I've taken, it's important to emphasize, does not try and derive like semantical meaning from this text. It's doing pattern matching, right? So if it finds the word access or step 3, that's enough, which means that, for example, to say it's not accessible means that that will get flagged in my criteria, what I'm marking for what means access. And this was, again, a reflection of the way that access sits in the UK right now, but also the fact that not knowing a property is accessible is as important as knowing it's accessible, right? Being able to just discount an option and not turn up, to something that you can't get into is just as valuable. So when I say access within this context, I'm talking about even stuff that just says not accessible. There's not actually, when you examine the data set, that many matches, but you have some like genuinely useful information, like, this home has steps in the hallway and therefore may not be suitable for a wheelchair. Thank you for some estate agent somewhere, there's only 2 of them, who are actually considering this information. You get slightly less useful things, potentially wheelchair accessible. I want to like dig deeper, because what does that mean, right? It's like, do I turn up? Do I not turn up? Yeah, but again, like, we're in such a crap state that someone actually bothered to think about it is of value to us. So this was the first visualization I created. Simply the idea that providing information on access is light. So every little box you see here is something that measures something about accessibility in a rental property, and everything else is not mentioning it. Again, the size of the box indicates the price. It's often just a ream of dark boxes with only a few lights. I think there's 51 properties in total of the entire data set that mention anything to do with accessibility. And this kind of conjures that first feeling, and why I talked about that experience of just being told by estate agents, by big technology systems, that you are not important enough. It's that feeling of being overwhelmed, of being crushed. I'm trying to create a sense of scale. But I've also, in this piece, kind of lost a little bit of that localized feel, as in, this is very much Greater London, and I want that to be connected to it. So it was a fun prototype, but was the first step to trying to create that feel of access is light. This is an example of that same data. This is what a garden is valued like in the rental market. The data's too big to actually fit in the screen, so it kind of like expands way off here and way off here. And that's what access looks like. Being very generous, as I said, most of those say not accessible, but we're treating that as value. So that, again, showed me there's something here, right? Like, we can create a piece that talks about the property market, but we can also make something that returns to my original meaning, which is reflecting what this feels like to see that, finding a garden, finding marble floors, finding chandeliers is easier than trying to find somewhere that you can get a wheelchair into. So the next step was to bring this into a games engine, and we have longitude and latitude for every single property. We can map that to a plane, grow a little bunch of cylinders or boxes around where these properties are, and throw it all together. And you get something that starts to look like Greater London. Again, like a lot of this process is not really knowing where you're going and just seeing the feedback of what this tells you. Immediately, I get that the river is probably one of the most important things. Trying to capture that river grounds where you are within the map. You have a few of the parks as well. I think like probably Richmond, probably Hyde Park, a few others scattered around there, which define the geometry. And this was completely unscalable. This is like rendering a million different polygons separately and trying to do lighting. This is a sped up video because I can't show you the one where it wasn't sped up because the letters were so slow. But again, this way of exploring the data set, and for me, trying to find what I'm trying to say while also presenting wider context around what this market is like and how it values access. It's a good start, but as I said, then comes the really boring bit of about 6 months of just trying to design the aesthetic of like, what does this look like? I need a map of Greater London. I want to put this on a plane. The river is really important, so I'm going to need to like map that in. Lots of fun questions, like we have bridges, but I don't really want to represent bridges. That's complicated. London is not flat. It's actually a height map, like, you know, scaled like this, but that makes it really hard to see all the data, which massively complicates the process. So exploring with all these aspects, bringing it into a games engine, putting some fancy water in, starting to create something that can better create that feel of how oppressive this system feels, but also make it very accessible for anyone to explore. And hopefully, yeah, this will play. So this was the part of the finished attempt, trying to reflect how rental prices spread across Greater London. So this just scrolls through the prices, scrolling down, and it grows each of the properties based on that price. I'll just let it run for a little bit. So we're not even talking about access yet, but again, we're just presenting something that takes this system and makes it visible and explorable. We're showing about price, we're showing how that's distributed. And then I'll run the slightly slower version before the faster version of what access feels like. So again, this principle of like access, information about access is light that illuminates and everything else is darkness. That's wheelchair access. 999 to 21K rent compared to stunning. Right, so I don't know how subtle this is because this is a very personal project and I've explained where this comes from, but you can see very clearly that I'm embedding within this like access and what it means. I'm now going to play just a high-speed version of this video because it takes about 30 minutes to run. And I just want you to get a feel for yourselves, what you discover, what's interesting to you, and how that balances against access. Actually, nothing less important than access within this data set. But I still didn't have that feeling of that original, like how crushing this system is. Like I showed you that initial web page one. So I really wanted to ground how oppressive this system feels by doing a kind of flyby, right? This is a mesh rendered in the game engine. It's very easy for us to flow a camera within these structures and explore again that this access, these points of information about access in this rental market do illuminate, right? They are what we want. They provide light and everything else in darkness, and really that sense of how oppressive the system feels. I'll just let it play a little scan around. So the attempt was to shame the property websites and make it very apparent that access is not a priority. Did we change anything? Did we set this out? I've run this project repeatedly every year, creating percentage maps of like, how is access doing? It kind of does this, except very recently it spiked up. Why did it spike up? Well, because WrongMove decided to add this field into their website where they explicitly label accessibility. From our perspective, we're measuring whether or not they've mentioned anything to do with access. So them putting accessibility into every single rental property on their entire website means they suddenly explode. What do they put as the information when they fill that in? Well, that's ask the agent. And that's literally every single rental property, which is this like horrific reasoning of a company to somehow address something without addressing it. It feels so indicative of the problem. But effectively, this addresses access without providing any information or any of the help or resolving any of the issues that I've talked about within this project. Yeah. So it kind of failed. That's okay. It makes it visible, as I said. It makes it aware that we have made these compromises. These are choices. And what I want to emphasize, and I hope I've made clear, is that these problems are not technological, right? Like, has WrongMove, has technology made it easier to find rental property in the UK? Well, if you take a market that is not regulated very well, that's out of control, and you make visibility of that for a lot of people like zero friction, you create a hyper-competitive market where technology has actually made it worse. WrongMove makes all their profit from agents, so they have zero incentive to ever add any onerous kind of effort onto those agents because that would cost them money, right? So as a company, they have no incentive to ever deal with this. Technology can never address this problem because it's a system that's operating based on profit, and what we're asking for is regulation and that idea that companies need to be controlled and their impact on society needs to be regulated such that it's less harmful, which is our whole initial point about the fact that we chose to make access an optional feature rather than a legally enforced. Thanks, Conservative Party. And that is my project WrongMove. I hope that was an interesting journey. There is always hope of things getting better, and there's always beautiful ways of talking how shit the system is, and I encourage you to do it if you have any issues yourself. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Have you found somewhere to rent?
Yes, yes, but I left for Berlin, Germany after 2 years because you have to do it every year, so that destroyed me.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask that question, but also the data set sounds quite interesting. Like, is that something that's available to other people to play around with anywhere? Or?
You can speak to me about it. The data is not public because I do not own the data. My project functions under the fact that I have no commercial benefit of this data and I'm using it for advocacy and artwork, which means that I am not in any way impinging or breaching the copyright of WrongMove, but I cannot in any way provide that data publicly. But if you're interested in doing something creative with it within the realm of fair use, then I'm happy to chat.
Yeah. Can I just ask a quick question about the visualization as well?
Yes.
The way in which things were visualized on the map, was that kind of weighted against any kind of average, or was that just kind of the absolute values, as it were? As in, something I noticed with the glowing, I guess I kind of wanted to know which areas skewed more to certain things, and sometimes it was hard because everything was glowing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. There's so much rich content within there. It is weighted, and like a lot of this is fine-tuned by me to find out. Again, like my focus is very specific on what I'm trying to say about access, but there is a lot of locality information in there, right? As in, like where is like modern the word most popular? Where is like spacious? Where is what's that horrible one I discovered? Vertical living, which is apartments. Where is that, right? So like there is a lot of correlated data. But again, it's just the scope of the project was to focus on that contrast between access and all these other things. It's a very rich data set, and there's a lot more you could do from it. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. That's great. I think I saw it in the fast video. Was one of the words pets?
Yes.
Because that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because that's sort of accessibility for humans needing access to bring in something else into the. I couldn't remember the visual of how much pets were versus wheelchair, accessibility points. But that seems like a very important thing for a lot of rental companies, because they need to provide access, or they need to make the property pet friendly. Mm-hmm. But it seems like so they've obviously got this in mind in terms of making something accessible, but not in nowhere near the same way that you're describing. But yeah. Can you just comment on that? Like they obviously are considering it in some way, but not in the human aspect of it. It's like it just seems very, counterintuitive.
Yeah. Yes. Children are the hardest other category to find places for, because rental properties do not want children. Then come pets, because it's more commercially competitive to allow pets sometimes. That's becoming an edge. What would I say? It's just perverse incentives, right? As in, it's an out of control market that is effectively paying to whatever competitive advantage purely based on capital you can get. So pets have that aspect, as in they can be a luxury aspect. So that's a good criteria for selling a property. Children are just completely disregarded, because that's not seen as luxury. You're not supposed to live in apartments if you have children. I live in an apartment with a child, but that's not a thing you're supposed to do. Explicitly to the point where some properties say, I think they had to change this because it did become illegal, was saying that you would not rent if you had children. They say that this rental property is not suitable for children. And you ask them and they'd be like, it's on the first floor, you can't have a child in a first floor apartment. So it's so layered, the problem, right? It's like the platform, it's the agents, it's the property developers, it's like all so screwed up that I can't see. That's what regulation and government is for, right? As in, it's always going to be skewed to whatever sells, be it pets, be it something else.
Hi. I'm Steph, by the way. Really interesting talk. It's really nice to hear someone talking about this kind of stuff and the passion behind it that you have. Firstly, I just want to mention about the fact of how I know people who have experienced similar situations where they couldn't even get on the housing list if it was accessible, because renters would not allow them to be on benefits when they actually got a property, which is pure discrimination, but it has apparently been helped now. I'm not well versed with the new housing standards going forward. Are you aware of anything that is actually meant to be helping with this at all?
So there is the fact that the percentage, there's a weird thing around the percentage of new builds that are built, often relating to the council, that have to be accessible. I'm going to forget the figure, whether it was 10 or 15%, which means you can find somewhere to live maybe, but you can't visit anyone else in any of the other 80% of the apartments. Other than that, I'm unaware. I think we get stuck in the fact that planning permission and the way the reflection of power, who has most in those relationships, are the property developers. And what I often see is that there'll be a promise of accessible property. I live in a building that has that promise of accessible property, but they'll put steps in. They won't actually consult with any disabled people. So they'll classify it as accessible without it being accessible. And then they won't want to modify it in any way to improve that access. And that's a big issue for most disabled people, because even if once you get there, no one will let you change a single thing to actually enable you to live in that space. I'm not aware of any new legislation that improves that. That's something that needs to be done.
Fair enough. Can I just have one? And also, thank you for the answer. And have you had any success with any political buy-in? Worst term ever, but any politicians or anything that have picked up on your...
Ironically, a few House of Lords members have been quite supportive of the project, creating that visibility. Individuals, yes. The weight of creating legislation under the last past governments, the governments we have, is to put something against growth, which seems like a really hard narrative. So people care, important people care, people elected care. And if you look at policies, the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats both score extremely highly on accessible housing and rentals. So there are political parties that really care about these things. Hopefully they get power soon.
Hi, thank you so much. I thought your talk was amazing, and I think it's a really important topic that people don't talk about enough. I feel like when people talk about accessibility, they often, there's a lot of focus on web accessibility, but they forget that we also have those bodies outside of the web. But it's like how the web refers to the physical world is also an important aspect. And I think it's also one of the reasons I might have avoided staying in some Airbnbs or using Airbnb as a platform, because I'm like, I don't know, like, if it's quite hard to tell if someone is going to be accessible or not, or if the host is going to be there, and that can make a difference. Yeah. But yeah, that's have you found any like examples of where like descriptions about like real world accessibility has been kind of provided well on the web? Or like, are there any standards of like how to do this well? A lot of people don't even seem to mention it at all, which is probably, that's bad. But like, how can it be better?
Yeah, so there's Wilmap, which is a German startup that allows users to contribute. It's more about the built environment and specifically shops. So it kind of is user contributed information about access. That's really, really good. It doesn't deal with getting from A to B, so it has no concept of what transitions through space is like. There's also Snowball, I think, that does a similar idea about getting communities who experience this stuff to be able to have a digital platform where they can describe it. Because you said like disability is hugely complicated, right? And I don't expect these rental markets to be able to understand what my access needs are. I just want a little bit of like information so I can filter and go myself and be like, what can I do? That really roots in the fact that disabled people's voices need to be the ones who are making this information, right? Because they can talk about this in a way that's more useful to all the other disabled community, and they get that disconnect with the physical environment and the digital, and that can be an interesting community way of bringing those people together, often physically as well, right? Like we've done this in Bath where people go on like street crawls where they effectively go around areas and start mapping the areas. Even to the point of putting letters through post boxes of shops to say, hey, you're not accessible, we're going to sue you, which actually works sometimes, even if you don't have to take them to court. So there's lots of cool little like initiatives like that. But yeah, disabled voices, the whole mantra of with disabled people rather than for them.
Thank you.
Hey, I don't know if this is working. Okay. Oh, it is. Okay, great, thank you. Just wondering, had WrongMove, have you spoken to WrongMove about it? Have they had a response to it?
Indirectly from employees, yes.
Okay.
Not from a company perspective, no.
Cool.
Yeah.
Be interested to see hear what the response.
I
would
mean,
be.
yeah, I obviously I can't draw a correlation with them adding information around access. How would I put it with WrongMove? I don't like, as a company, it's optimized for shareholder profit, right? Like it's a floated company, it's delivering to its stakeholders. It doesn't feel like a bad company. Like there is clearly like as an incentives within it to, for example, make it easier for people to find apartments around climate, right? Like that's cool. Again, it's that when you put profit up against access, profit tends to win.
Yeah.
They may find profit in addressing more climate-friendly properties than they will finding access.
Cool. Thank you. It's really incredible. I really enjoyed your talk.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else? But the profit side of things is interesting because your example of turning up on the doorstep and going, oh, I can't go up the stairs, that's wasting their time. That's loss. That's time that they're losing in the process. So if you could spin it in that sense of like, actually, it's making the whole process easier for the estate agents. We love those guys and everyone else. It's like that's a way that actually does help the profit in some weird way that they're spending less time, or you're getting less wasted time, I guess, in terms of like people not having to tell them, oh, sorry, I didn't realise you were in a wheelchair. That's the sort of, that conversation doesn't happen if it's explicitly stated on the website, right?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think the problem is that the margins the estate agents are making and the prices and how high they're spiking, it's probably a tiny percentage. But it's a good point. There is definitely a perverse incentive of arguing that if they make things more accessible, they'd waste less time. Yeah, it's a good point.
Does the data enable you to identify whether a wheelchair inhabitant of a home would be paying a premium because I'm trying to think how to make this question make sense. Are homes that are wheelchair accessible from the data, are they more expensive to rent than other homes?
Yes.
Like in the same location, for example, or in the same...
It's the luxury aspect. Access is a luxury, right? It's all the things you need to access are, again, like Greater London, quite an old city, but like new built, right? So if it's newly built, it's more likely to be accessible, which means it's more expensive, right? So I've only ever lived in new builds because those are the ones with lifts and access.
Yeah, so in the same development, would it be more expensive to have you talked about the 15 or 10% of homes allocated as
maybe not directly in rental, but you are going to lose everything in deposit because, how do I use the exact words? Every single apartment I've ever stayed in, what's that word? Unusual usage of a wheelchair means you're going to lose your deposit. So I've had that with like, the floor of the carpet has been beyond reasonable use, and so you have to pay like all your deposit to them. Again, that's because I think there were some improvements around how you get your deposit back, but the reality is that, again, where is the power in that relationship and how is the regulation protecting the weaker party? You get screwed in other ways.
Yeah, that was an amazing talk. It was really good. I just love the fact that you went, and just got the data yourself. There's just something really badass just about just getting on with it and just being like, right, I'm going to find stuff out. It was really inspiring. I'm not a lawyer or anything, but I was wondering if like there are, maybe better human rights or discrimination laws around the workplace, which might mean maybe commercial properties are slightly more accessible. I wonder if you've scraped any commercial property as opposed to residential, and if you see any difference there?
Yeah, good question. No, I didn't dig deeply into commercial, mainly again, because that's not my frame of reference. I wanted to deal with the majority experience of trying to find something to rent. Having worked in many inaccessible commercial buildings, again, it's a lot of factors. There are a lot of inaccessible commercial buildings which can't be made accessible because access for work has very tight restrictions on what they will fund. So to give you a concrete example, there was a commercial property which didn't have a lift. The government fund would pay for a lift, but I would be the only person allowed to use it in the entire building and no one else would be able to. that's the nature of access for work, which doesn't provide a very interesting opportunity for the person who owns the building, who is actually pretty positive about getting a lift in, but not one only I can use. So you have the legacy of London. I don't think being old is an excuse. The ancient temples of Rome were accessible for wheelchairs, so screw that argument. But again, that commercial space, probably from the work perspective, sometimes has that. But the reality is I worked in a building where I had to climb up 3 or 4 flights of stairs because there was no access. It was that or not get the job. Again, like how empowered are you to say no? How empowered are you to take someone to court? How many prosecutions are there for breaches of access within commercial space and within employment? It's really hard. And again, it puts all the onus onto the individual who's suffering that. And there's very little support outside of that. Again, collapsing legal system that makes that even harder.
So on the legal thing, have you spoken to anyone legally? Is there like do you have in your mind any kind of aim of how we could resolve this?
I mean, regulation of access, right? So again, I have many, many answers to this. WrongMove could put a mandatory field, which you had to put, which was provide some information about access, right? That could just be a few tick boxes. That could be something. That would immediately force all of the agents to put something in. Are you meaning that they're actually going to bother? You don't have that power, right? But that could be one first really not even legal step, right? That could be them saying, yes, we would do this. That would be, I think, a good step forward. Then we hit into regulation, right? As in there should be an enforcement in much the same way we do have about energy ratings, right? There should be the same enforcement of provide something around access information. That is all feasible within legal frameworks. How do we make that happen? I don't know if I'm too jaded, but I don't have a lot of faith in the legal framework under the current governments we've had. I feel like pressure on companies to behave more ethically tends to be more realistic, unfortunately. And that's mainly why I address these issues, because there are good individuals within these companies, and sometimes that can be enough to change some behavior.
Thank you.
Anybody else got a question? If not, all right then. We'll say thank you again to Joseph.
Thank you.
All right, before you go, please don't forget today's First Friday, our monthly social event. So from 5 till 7 p.m. today, you can come along to the studio, grab a drink, and explore some of the work that our community is making, including some work about accessibility. If you want to stick around and hot desk today or find out more about what we do, please come find one of the studio team. We'll be happy to help. Studio team, give us a wave. Here we are. If you're watching online, drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. If you like what you've seen here today and want to help us keep bringing you great talks like this one, please do visit watershed.co.uk/donate. Watershed is a charity. We really do rely on the generosity of our supporters to continue our work. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you again next time.